Oshi No Ko needs no explanation, especially if you clicked here just for that reason, because it's a video on the hit anime of the season. Growing in popularity quickly, even though it was already a pretty well-known manga, especially as the author is super well-known with previous works as Love is War, Oshi No Ko took the internet by storm with cosplays, dances, music, and most of all, the one character that kept being shown around over and over with Instagram Reels and Twitter, the idol herself, Ai Hoshino. Clips being shared around like crazy, bringing in new viewers such as myself, thinking this anime is a wholesome one with a famous idol taking care of her kids until, those perceptions were... I was lied to, bro. What the fuck? And because those perceptions fell apart and reality unravels was when, we find out that the star herself, one that we assumed was the main character, she fucking dies. What? What the fuck? And so I was so lost when this shit happens. And one of the most gut-wrenching and saddest scenes, seeing Ai die in the hands of a stalker as she's holding her son in her arms and her daughter watching her pass away behind the door. Wow, the perfect girl, all happy, all jumpy, excited, living her life to the fullest, killed right before our eyes. Why? What the fuck? As the stalker cries out those lies that she told, the I love yous, and again, all lies. But this is just a fan, an obsessed fan, a monster. As the mystery kicks off, who is Ai Hoshino? And what is the truth behind her? What is lying behind those starry eyes? And, well, this is where the series kicks off. And her son, known as Aqua, starts off the mystery to find out what truth lies behind, who his mother really is, and swearing to avenge his mother and kill the man responsible that basically sent the stalker to, kill Ai, and this person he's looking for is his father. Now, something about this anime and what I'm really going after in this whole thing is basically my personal review on season 1, as the manga is something that I want to talk about separately, especially with the recent chapters, which I will get into soon. And, well, because I started watching the anime without reading the manga until, I started reading it, so I caught up now. Something that caught me off guard and about the anime and everything in general is basically just its representation of the dark side of the industry. Now, this is something that a lot of people are talking about, which I feel like some people are getting annoyed by, and well, I get why people are super going into it, because it is something that is so unique in a sense that you wouldn't really expect an anime to really go into it. Because, typically animes, you got your little love stories and talking about isekais and fucking ninjas and shit. Nothing really goes into deeply about how the real world kind of is. Or they kind of gloss over it, but it was never something major. And so that makes the anime, at least to me, interesting. Kicking off the episode 1, which is which is almost a full hour, so it's a mini movie in a sense, or a movie, and how the idols are being treated and how little they get paid for the amount of shows that they play, and the only way to push through the fucking industry is to lie again and again, but those lies come back to you, and sometimes in the worst way possible. And the idol scene isn't the only aspect that's put on the front. So is acting and the film industry, as we see child actors and later adult actors and actresses, and the way that they get treated. When we first see an instance of the film industry, and it's toxic culture of that whole thing, was when we saw it through the eyes of Aqua when he takes the role of a child actor in a film, so his mother, Ai, can have a bigger role. Since before this scene plays out, I was like hired to be like a cameo in this like series that they were filming, and so they basically like cut her like part like really down, and so Aqua gets upset, and so that whole thing starts with like Aqua's like, why would you do that? And so they arrange like, okay, the director goes on is like, all right, you played this part, and we'll let I have a bigger role, and lead her more into the whole like film industry, which ends up happening. And so this is where we meet her, like Aqua's like co-star, and this is Kana, a popular a popular child actress who constantly gets roles that are after because she's a big name as a child actress. Or so she was, because the moment she grew up, she was no longer cute enough, and so she was no longer needed, which represents basically the whole idea of like child actors getting thrown into the dump once they reach a certain age because they're just too old for any sort of industry. And again, like Kana is basically just left behind, and she starts receiving really like little roles, and she's no longer the big name that she used to be, right? Because people just like attack her because she's no longer the little cutesy little girl in these like old movies, because that's the only way that they viewed her as. And she's no longer, she's not Kana herself anymore. She's just a child actress who no one cares about anymore, which is such a sad aspect to see Kana like come to the realization that no one like needs me, I'm not needed, and my time is over, which is so upsetting because again, this is something that happens in real life. And I mean, hell, like maybe many of us can see it now through the eyes of someone like Kana. That's like, she was someone who was big in the industry because she was cute, but now no longer needed, and so she's just tossed aside by the industry that she was very loving and passionate about. Like hell, like she even like went on to like bully Aqua during when they first met. And yeah, it's like just this like sad realization that she has, which is very like, it was something that they played out perfectly, which hell, it was insane. Now we move on. Years after the passing of Ai, the little boy Aqua, now who is in high school with Ruby, re-enters the film industry. This basically comes out of the thing about like him wanting to get revenge. And so Aqua knows that her being killed came from the industry that she was a part in, and the only way he wanted to get closer to the film industry was because that's where his father basically was around, and how like I ended up meeting his dad. And so that's where that whole thing starts to happen. And he gets more of an opportunity to find out about I, as this is something that he's been looking into for so long. And after meeting Kana is basically a step closer to getting to that goal, because Kana used to be well known, but she still has a name to herself, even if she wasn't as popular as she used to be. Fast forward, the person he meets, the director, who knows a bit about who I met, that person being the father. And this director that he meets starts to ask him about joining a reality show so he can get the answers that he wants. And so the reality show arc starts bringing a light to another aspect of this whole like industry, which starts to lead into one of the darkest and saddest aspects of like this like series and the industry in general, which is something that is discussed a lot lately, which I mean, it's one of the saddest things that happen. And it is crazy. It is really crazy. And the way that Oshi No Ko like plays it out is probably one of the best like representations of this whole like this whole aspect of social media in its influence and its harassment towards people, and how it affects these like actors and actresses, especially if they're just like young teenagers. And so the combination of like social media influence and harassment, and how bigger folks in the industry just don't care about you, and they only care about the money, which many of us like have seen. It's always been a part of the industry, and Oshi No Ko like manages to pull off that aspect really well, like I mentioned earlier, better than many were able to, especially currently with this fucking hellhole called the Idol, which is about like the darker side of the industry, but it just became a weird sort of like porn. We don't talk about it. And so yeah, this happens like during the middle point of the season, where we get introduced to various characters, two which become kind of a major, like, they start to move into major roles into the series. During the beginning of the season of Oshi No Ko, season 1, we get an instance of like the internet and the way that people react towards these like idols and etc., right? And we see it through the eyes of Ai herself when she was around, and we see it in the moments where she's looking at her phone, trying to go through an ego surf, and then people mention how she's no longer the way that she used to be, and they start like basically somewhat attacking her, which brings her down a lot. And so when she's performing, and this like performance that is really like all over the place on Instagram and etc., we see, before that whole like scene plays out, we see Ai like performing, and all these like comments about, specifically the one comment that she finds basically like haunting her and is all over like her her vision and the way that she's like going on about it, which brings her down a lot. And so even when the majority is like praises, any negative comment will ruin everything to these people, which we see during the midpoint, and we get to see during the middle point of the season how that sort of like criticism and especially the hatred becomes too much, and cyber harassment, the whole idea of like cancel culture and attacking someone for no reason without finding out the whole story starts to take over a person for a mistake that they commit. And Oshi No Ko takes this aspect into a deep point, which really just opened up like a whole like can of worms on how like we view these like idols and the way that they get treated online. I've recently spoken about like the Akane scene, and in the scene where she attempts to take her own life, and how it parallels to a real incident of a pro wrestler who ended her own life for similar reasons Akane had back in like 2020, and may she rest in peace, and hopefully her mother is doing much better now. And the internet is a messed up place. I know it's like a cheap jab because everyone says it, but especially sites like Twitter, where most of the time we treat celebrities as not real people, especially those who are trying to move up in the industry. And I know there's people who deserve it, and that's always going to be a thing. And like most adults can bear with the idea of like, oh, I'm getting like attacked online, who cares? But a teenager can, or someone who's younger cannot really go on about that the same way that maybe an experienced adult would. And so this happened to Akane, and that whole sense of harassment ended up becoming too much, to the point where it's like, all right, well, she attempts to take her own life at some point. And it was lucky for Akane, because she at least had someone who like was like caring for her. She had people who was there for her. She had Aqua who saved her. Kana was there. Or well, I don't think she was. No, it was a different character who was there. But she had people who was looking out for her. And sadly, this doesn't always happen in the real world, as many actors, especially child actors, and we've seen it multiple times, they don't have that same support, and so they end up going down a horrible path because of the shit that they get told and the harassment they get for the dumbest things ever. And it is a sad realization. And so this whole scene, like, it brings out more than what is expected, and it sheds light to this whole thing, which hopefully more people start to like understand. And yeah, like this Episode 6 is one of the saddest episodes of the season. And well, yeah, I mean, sadly this industry and what we see with Oshi No Ko, it's a hard place, and it's a horrible, industry in general. Like, I know there's like good parts of it, but the darker aspects of the film industry is usually like shut out by the dreams that people have and all these things, but we never listen to the stories about like how these like actors get mistreated or any of that. And Oshi No Ko was able to represent those aspects like really well, which I really like enjoy about the anime, with like looking through like the eyes of like Akane and Kana, like, and all the things that they went through. Yeah, it's one of my favorite animes in the moment, which I really recommend if you haven't watched it. I know this video is a little longer, and I hope like if you manage to make it through, I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is only like part one of my review in general, and the next part is mainly just gonna go into the whole like Ruby like little aspect, and because this mainly focus on like the actors like Aqua, but the next part is basically just gonna be about like Ruby and Miyaki like starting B Komachi up again, and this also includes like me talking about Memko, and it's just gonna be like a fun little like review, which I hope you guys will enjoy. And yeah, the next part is gonna be a little bit more like lighthearted and more enjoyable. And yeah, and I'm gonna talk about the opening, which is one of my favorite like openings in anime, at least so far. And so yeah, that's gonna be the next part, which hopefully should be out sooner because this took a while for me to complete. And moving forward, I'm gonna talk about the manga now, because the recent chapters has been pretty insane, and I'm gonna talk about it. and I keep saying but that's basically it for today. And if you haven't watched the anime, which you guys probably did, if you know what I'm talking about, please, hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like or subscribe, because I'm gonna like try to work on bettering these videos in general. And I think that's about it. If you haven't seen the anime, I recommend watching it because it is amazing. At least to me it is. And don't listen to the people who's like going on all over the place about like, oh my god, it's like overrated. Like, no, watch it yourself. You're going to love it. I'm sure that you're gonna love it. And I think that's really about it. And those are my final thoughts about the day. And if you're a manga reader right now, it's going insane. And if you're an anime only, if you're hearing the shit about the manga, don't listen to it right now. Don't listen to it. Just watch the anime, and if you want to catch up to the manga, catch up to the manga, but do not listen to what the internet is saying. Alright? Alright. Well, that has been Anthony. That's a horrible way to end it off, but it has been me. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like, share, whatever, subscribe. Do whatever you want. If you didn't like it, dislike it. That's cool too. And I'll see you guys on the next review. Next part of the review, and me talking about the manga. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye. I'm tired.